There are two rival narratives about January 6th. And these narratives are so different that you not only have to scratch your head and ask, how could two such opposite accounts have developed? But how are they so energetically sustained by the two sides when only one of them can be correct? The issue, of course, is whether January 6th was really an insurrection, yes or no. As you know, I don't think it was. I have ridiculed the idea that it is. I think I'm in that sense in the Republican mainstream. But the rival narrative is that look for yourself. Look at all the fellows trying to break into the Capitol, smashing glass. Look at the skirmishes between the police and the protesters. It was very definitely an insurrection. And again, this view is doggedly maintained. It is consistently upheld by the mainstream media. Every Democrat is singing out of this choir book. So who's right? How do you arbitrate between these two narratives? Well, one clue is you look to see what the other side says privately. So it'd be interesting if privately, if people had, let's say, access to Debbie and my conversations, and privately we said things like, oh, you know, it really was an insurrection, Debbie. Of course, we can't say that on the podcast. So that would, if somebody could get a recording of me saying that, then it would show that I know it was an insurrection, but I'm just publicly denying it because, of course, I'm not an honest person. But conversely, if we can get video showing that the other side privately admits that it wasn't an insurrection, that would be very telling, wouldn't it? And as it turns out, we do have that video. And who is it from? It's from Nancy Pelosi's daughter. Nancy Pelosi's daughter, Alexandra Pelosi, was making a documentary. Now, it's very interesting because, first of all, she seems to have known that January 6th would be a huge deal. She had a film crew. She was filming Nancy Pelosi, her mom, even before the events of January 6th. And all of this by itself raises the question, how was she so sure that this would become some kind of historic day? Now, more importantly, she did interviews with some of the January 6th defendants. This was subsequently, obviously, after these guys were being called out, and she ingratiated herself with them, and she said, I want to record you, and some of them agreed to interviews. But one of these defendants said, listen, I don't mind being interviewed by you, but I'm also going to record what you say. Is that okay? And she said, sure, you can do that. And so the recording I'm now referring to is provided by a January 6th defendant who recorded Pelosi. So Pelosi is on video, and the recording has been affirmed both by the person who took it and by this person's lawyer as authentic. And what you see in it is that Alexandra Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's daughter, is very clear that this was not an insurrection. This was not an attempt to overthrow the government. In fact, she herself not only ridicules that idea, but minimizes or basically goes, what these people are doing is nothing. It's no big deal. And all of this is from Nancy Pelosi's own daughter coming out of her own mouth and in her own voice. Now, the video itself is somewhat long, and I don't want to go through the entire transcript. I'm just going to read some of the lines. These are lines out of Alexandra Pelosi's mouth. She's talking about the shaman guy. And here's what she says. The shaman did nothing. What did the shaman do? He stood there. So, in other words, what kind of insurrectionist is just standing there, basically doing nothing, making no effort to take over the government? Here's Nancy Pelosi continuing. Are the Proud Boys white supremacists? She goes, I'm friends with Gavin McInnes, the founder of the Proud Boys. When someone talks about the Proud Boys, they say, well, white supremacists. She laughs as if, ha ha ha, what a ridiculous concept. She then says to the January 6th defendant, you're going to be able to laugh about this one day. And then she goes on to say, if there was an insurrection, you were supposed to have a plan. This was the sorriest insurrection in history. Honey, this is exactly what you say. If this was an insurrection, it's the most incompetently planned, poorly executed insurrection ever. And Nancy Pelosi's daughter knows that. So she's laughing it off, meaning this is not a serious insurrection. People may be saying, this is 1776 all over again, but they mean that metaphorically. They're not taking any steps to blow up the Capitol, to sort of forcibly seize the Capitol with force of arms, none of that. She continues to say, DC is a lot of people who work for the government. I don't think they're sympathetic. If you got it moved, meaning the trial, you totally get off. So here is Nancy Pelosi's daughter admitting that the DC juries are biased, that they are basically government operatives of one sort or the other because they all are, feeding off the government trough. You can't really get a fair trial in DC. And then she goes on to say, after Democrats lose the House, they get rid of the committee, people may lose interest. No one's going to care when the Democrats are out of power. You take Biden out of office, then who cares? What she's saying is that this is all just a hoopla created by the Democrats because they have the power to do it. And that the moment they're out of power, the issue itself loses its significance. Why? Because it's a propaganda issue that is being exploited by the left while it can. But it's a propaganda issue that bears very little resemblance, as she herself privately realizes, to the truth.